again, everybody. Now we have another author in our series of Meet the Author, which we're only able to do, as you know, via Skype or Zoom or whatever. So today I am talking to Emily Bitto, author of Wild Abandon, which is published by Allen and Unwin. And well, without further ado, we shall launch into it. Emily, hi, it is so good to see you.
So great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Well, and it's great that you could come and do this on while the rest of the world is out having a bit of a holiday, or probably pooped after their holiday. Here we are, talking books. Nothing better.
Nothing better.
All right, we'll launch straight in. So, your first novel, The Strays, and I will just, a little aside. When I first came to Australia, which was only 6 years ago, I had read a certain amount of Australian literature, but not very much. And I think the very first Australian author I read was The Strays by you. And of course, I was not sideways. Absolutely fantastic book. So, thank you for writing it. I really loved that book. And I love this book. So, you won a lot. You got a lot of long lists, short lists for The Strays. The bar then is, and you won, of course, the Stella. The bar is very, very high for your second novel. So, how do you rate your own second novel?
Look, I'm actually pretty happy with it, mainly because I feel like I did something really different and I really challenged myself stylistically, as well as, just in terms of the content. And I think for me, this is a bit of a, selfish way of approaching it, but for me it's all about kind of challenging myself as a writer, not getting bored, exploring, whatever it is that's kind of obsessing me at the time. So I feel like I kind of did that, and I'm pleased that I did that, rather than just trying to kind of write another historical novel, say, or, something that sort of fitted into the same genre.
Yes. Would you say there are any commonalities between the two? I don't know why I'm asking that question. Are there? What do you think links them?
There are. I think, this is something that's probably been pointed out to me. I feel like I'm one of those writers that kind of write quite instinctively, and then other people tell me what the themes are afterwards, which is nice. But I think probably the main one is there's a kind of young, impressionable, naive, sort of semi-naive protagonist kind of going into a completely sort of foreign world and being kind of seduced by this new world, but also having a kind of quite dark, ambivalent experience.
And you've set it, of course, there's always this link back to Australia in Wild Abandon, but you have set it in the States. Why in America?
Why in America? I think I'm really fascinated by the relationship between Australia and America, and the way that America has sort of become the dominant culture, the dominant sort of cultural influence on Australia, I think. And I was thinking a lot about, travel, and the way that, even from when I was the same age as Will, my protagonist, I think the kind of the place that, people want to go for their first overseas trip has sort of shifted, or that the sense of kind of where is that, and this is again something about Australia. I think there's a sense that there's a kind of a cultural centre, kind of an elsewhere, that's where the real culture resides. And I think probably for my generation that was the UK or Europe, and it seems to have kind of shifted from my experience of the kind of young people that I've spent time with to America. And that's just something that really fascinated me, the way that shift has happened, but yet there's still the same desire in Australians to kind of go to that elsewhere to sort of find the cultural centre. It's probably a bit of a cultural cringe, I think.
And I think one of the things that, there you are, I'm going back into what you say, people read your work and then tell you what the themes were that they took away from it. And in your novel, there seemed to be, I actually sort of said, look at plot, look at themes, and see what is Emily Bitto doing with this novel. And the themes just became this ever expanding. There were layers upon layers upon layers of what was going on. I suppose what really interests me first and foremost, and I said the question I really wanted to ask you, is that you were writing male characters. I mean, I'm not going into this, can we write other people's stories, but was that something you'd always wanted to do, or at what point did you work out that you were going to be centering or telling us the story through the experiences of young Will? Or I mean, it's predominantly male characters. So was that prior to having the actual inspiration for your story, or was that itself?
It kind of came out of that inspiration, I think. So the sort of initial seed of inspiration for the novel, without giving too much away, was a news story that I read in 2011 about a guy who owned a large collection of exotic animals in the States. And this was kind of pre-Tiger King days, and it just blew my mind. It was, I'd never really known that this world existed, and the story, again, without kind of going into too much detail, it was not a good news story. It was pretty tragic, and I just sort of started researching, this story, and something in it kind of just really spoke to me, and I knew I had to write about it. And so that was the initial seed, and I knew that that I needed a kind of way into that story, I guess, because it was an American story, and I knew I couldn't approach that from the inside because I'm not American and I don't know, American culture as an American does. So I sort of brought in this Australian protagonist, and then, those kind of ideas developed out of that, because I thought, well, it's about travel as well. It's about, the kind of what we want out of those kind of first overseas trips. And then I started thinking a lot about the kind of masculine quest as a sort of narrative trope. And the more I sort of got into that, the more I just really embraced the idea of kind of writing about masculinity, I guess. But through the lens of that idea of the kind of masculine quest that is, such an old trope in literature. It's kind of as old as storytelling. There's always a youngest son going out into the world to seek his fortune, and and I got really interested in thinking about that sort of those narratives and why it's always a man.
Yes, questing women. I don't know where they are. They're out there. We probably need you to keep writing so we can come up with one of those. We have made basically this one character who is also fleeing. I mean, it seemed to me to be less of an actual, well, it was a quest, I suppose, but also he seemed to be leaving behind conflict and leaving. Was he running away?
He was running away, yes, definitely. But I think he was also, wanting to go out into the world and basically kind of come back a different person. I think that's often the fantasy of particularly those early overseas trips, and the way that they allow you to kind of try out, different identities and different versions of yourself. So I think Will is a character who's quite desperate to become cool. He feels he is kind of inadequate. He's from a small town, and he's kind of been fleeing all his life in a way. But he doesn't quite know what he's trying to get to. Something that will transform him into the person he wants to be.
Yeah, there's something very Irish about this in a way as well. It resonates very much with these kind of the Irish diaspora over to both England and the States, but you're fleeing. You also, I mean, your book does seem to, it has quite definitely two parts, and I think this is when we're talking about going to, Will is going to sort of try and get some new experiences. He goes to the sort of the obvious first destination, which is New York. So is that where you're sort of, are you also trying to get us to look at the America which is associated with the New York and the glamour and the scene? Because is there a second America for you? Do you think that there are because your book is quite definitely two parts. It's part one, and you call it America, and part two is America. So,
yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a million Americas. And, you know, I guess with that, I wanted to sort of gesture to the fact that, you know, when you do kind of go to a new place, you can only see the part of it that you land in. And for Will, you know, there's this one America, and that's probably what he has in mind, really, is the first America. And then he ends up in the second version, which is utterly different. But, you know, I guess carrying on from that, it could have been any other version of America. And you know, we just don't have the opportunity to kind of experience all facets of a foreign culture when we travel. So, you know, the two that he experiences are utterly different from one another, but they're just the two that he...
And, of course, dictated by you as the sort of the puppet master. Obviously, you needed to get to your story as well, so hence that one. Do you like your characters, Will and Wayne?
I do, yeah.
Tell us a bit about Wayne. Tell us, we haven't spoken about Wayne much, so just give us a little bit of a character.
About Wayne?
Yeah, as well, yeah.
Yeah, so Wayne is the guy that Will ends up working for in Ohio that owns this menagerie of wild animals, over 50 lions, tigers, grizzly bears, wolves, primates, and just in this kind of rural property in Ohio. And he's a Vietnam vet. He's quite a sort of conflicted character. He's got sides to him that are very kind of exuberant, and he's lived, you know, always lived on the edge. He's got so much kind of energy for life and wants to kind of live life to the fullest, but at the same time he's very damaged by his experiences in Vietnam, and he's at a very difficult point in his life. And I mean, the same with Will. So they sort of they're very different. Will's a lot younger, but there's something that kind of bonds them together, probably because they're both going through this kind of heartbreak and crisis in their life. And I like both of them. I mean, I think they're both, as I said, troubled. They've both got definitely unappealing aspects to their personalities,
sure
but, you know, so do we all.
You're very generous.
Complex and conflicted characters, I think.
Yes, good thing. Because there is that sort of, there's a vulnerability in both of these men, and there's also this, they seem to want to measure themselves up against and as you call your novel, an abandon or a something that gives them a thrill or a rush, which has fairly disastrous consequences in many ways. So they were that was one of the themes that I came up with, was, you know, that connection between vulnerability and violence. That wasn't a question, I just noticed, and it's one of the things authors hate. It's like, yeah, I don't know what you think about it, but are you interested in that? Was that something that motivated you? Is this idea of control, self-control? Because I mean, when you stand in front of, even when I go to the zoo and I see a panther, part of me is going wow, and part of me is going ugh. Were you working on that idea as well of this, and why masculine? Why is the male so fascinated by this raw power?
I mean, I was definitely sort of drawn to this idea of kind of wildness. And I think that kind of came out of, I really wanted to write a very kind of contemporary novel after The Strays. I mean, it's set in 2011. It's already kind of a fair way in the past, but, you know, about generally the kind of strange, sort of surreal moment of hyper-capitalism that we're kind of living through in the West. And, you know, particularly the New York section is sort of an attempt to kind of portray that in a completely over-the-top way. But also I think that the role of the animals, something that I kind of have thought a lot about, you know, in this time that we're living in, which, you know, in one sense you might think of as kind of extremely sort of civilized, there is this kind of yearning, I think, in humans for something that's a kind of closeness to nature, or a closeness to something wild and animal and sort of, you know.
Interesting, yes.
And that's kind of what, I was sort of trying to think about and explore in this, what that is and what all of the kind of forms that takes.
There's an interesting thing you write in one of part of the when we're talking about these exotic animals and how we access them or how you can buy them. And you, at some point, I think Will asks, or it's mentioned that the Amish people have the right to is that a fact, or is that a fact in your book fact?
No, it is actually,
Really?
yeah. I mean, I think anyone kind of potentially can, but the Amish are apparently, like,
It's one of
in Ohio at least. I think the laws have kind of all changed since I wrote this, luckily. But they were sort of the main dealers in exotic animals. There's a kind of exotic animal auction that happens several times a year in Ohio, and you can buy all kinds of any kind of creatures that you can imagine. I mean, now I think you can't have lions and tigers, but camels and kangaroos and zebras and just wild.
It must be very wild. Did you actually manage to get to the States when you were researching this?
Yeah, I did. I was actually lucky enough to get a travel scholarship. It was called the Felix Meyer Travel Scholarship through Melbourne Uni, and I got to go and spend time both in New York and in Ohio, and just kind of soak up the atmosphere in Ohio. But I also visited some, particularly like one sort of animal sanctuary where they had a lot of animals rescued from private zoos and things, because already by that stage a lot of the laws had kind of changed around the animal ownership. But I did get quite up close with some of those exotic animals, and that was amazing, like a lot closer than you get in zoos in Australia.
It must have been astonishing.
There really is something quite sort of powerful about being close to a huge tiger.
Yes. Yeah, so that dreadful fascination, like
Yeah.
So I had this novel's been going for, I mean, it's been a long time between drinks in a way for us. 2015 and now 2021. So you've been working on it for the 6 years?
No, there was a couple
Emily,
of years
what have you been doing for 6 years?
There was a couple of years where I didn't get to write at all because I opened a bar 6 months after The Strays came out, and I was just working crazy hours in the bar. I was doing sort of 90-hour weeks for quite a long time. So that just stopped me from writing completely.
Yes, small business I can totally understand will stop you from doing. Wow. And you still have this bar?
2016, 17.
Golly, that's astonishing. Well done you for doing that. So I suppose, as we often hear talked about writing as a source of income, and you can tell me that you're not going to answer this question, but it's very hard to make a living as a full-time writer, unless you're possibly a professional writer or in that very lucky category. So what else takes up your time?
Well, I'm still involved in the bar, although I'm not doing shifts anymore. And I teach creative writing. I've done a lot of teaching at various universities, and for the last 3 years at the Faber Writing Academy. And then bits and pieces of freelance writing, and I do a bit of manuscript assessment, and I was a mentor in the Kill Your Darlings mentorship program this year. And so, piecing together bits
patchworky,
and pieces,
but yes,
all most writers do.
Talking about, again, I'm just going back to Wild Abandon. When you write, it's something that interests me about when writers write. Are they writing, inside their heads? Are you writing to a particular audience? You're writing for yourself? What would you say about that for you, particularly with this novel? Are you sort of like targeting or thinking most particularly about anybody as a reader, who your reader is going to be, or is it not so much that?
Probably primarily I'm writing for myself in the actual process stage, because I think there's something, it's probably really why I write, is that when you get into that, there's lots of different terms for it, but like a flow state is kind of one of the buzzwords that goes around now. But there is something really amazing about, when you're on a roll and you're just writing and you feel like the words are kind of just coming from somewhere, and you look back and go, oh, did I write that? And the concentration and the way that time can just pass without any awareness of it. When you're really, really focused, I think that's kind of, for me, one of the most satisfying experiences in life. And I'm constantly sort of chasing that, I guess, in the writing process. But I think, in terms of like the language, probably I'm really writing, I was hoping to be writing for an audience that's, interested in language, willing to read something that's a little bit more elaborate in prose style than a lot of, I think, contemporary Australian fiction. So maybe challenging people a little bit with that, but so far people have responded well to the prose style.
And do you want, or are you trying to elicit a sort of any particular kind of reaction or emotion in your reader particularly with your content, with your actual narrative?
I mean, I think I was trying to kind of capture, again, going back to that idea of kind of the strangeness and sort of over the topness of this world that we're living in. I wanted to kind of give the reader almost a kind of heightened sense of that, like a sense of kind of bordering on kind of excessiveness in every aspect of the book, in the prose, in the amount of kind of detail, in the, to kind of create this sense of like onward rushing, sort of more.
It's now you're saying it. That is exactly what happened. Exactly.
Really?
You got the rush. Oh, goodness, yes. Particularly the descriptions of standing in front of the cages and Will's, what happens to him, that visceral sort of gush of like, you lived it. It was astonishing. Yes, I loved it. Yes, got all of it. Even the hedonistic New York business, it was all like so, too much. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
We are going to run out of time in about 1 minute and 40 seconds. So before I let you go, I wanted to ask one other thing, because we like to ask. I think it's one of the things our customers love very much is to say, "Oh, I've liked this person's book, and what do they like reading?" Have you got any books that are sort of in your sights that you may have read or are really interested in reading that are coming out or are out at the moment?
I actually just today started Christos Tsiolkas's new novel, 7.5, which I'm really excited to read. And I'm also actually, this is weird, they both have 7 in the title. I'm also currently reading Christina Stead's 7 Poor Men of Sydney, which I hadn't read. I was ashamed to realise, and I'm absolutely loving that too. So those are my kind of 2 current reads. I'm one of those terrible people that has several books on the go at the same time, and I switch between them depending on my mood.
Oh yeah, I ditto, can get that. There are some books we just go, no, not in the mood for that one. Yes, this Tsiolkas has just come into the shop, so that will be one I'm sure people will be looking out for it as well.
And I just bought Claire Louise Bennett's Checkout 19 too. I really loved her book, Pond.
Yes, Pond was
I haven't started that yet, but excited about that one too.
Yeah, very different. Lovely reads there.
Yeah.
And just very quickly, plans next, or are you just going to ride this wave for a while and then slowly think about the next novel?
Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas, a couple of things I'm sort of just... One that I've done quite a lot of research on, but I haven't started writing. But yeah, I'm sort of enjoying having a bit of a fallow period. I do struggle to kind of start something when I'm talking about the current novel. I feel like it kind of keeps my head in it and with those characters, and I need to kind of really let them go to be able to take on new characters, I think.
Yes, well, you've well deserved it. We'll have to stop there. I'm really sorry because we could talk forever. I just want to hold this up to the camera and say, just have that. You must have this cover. You must be so proud of that. Isn't that just glorious? What a gorgeous cover with our lovely tiger on the bottom. Look, Emily, it has been wonderful. We could, for the next time round, we'll plot an in-store event. It's not a happening thing at the moment, unfortunately, but it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time, and good luck with everything. The pub.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, I'll just say goodbye to everybody. All right. That was Emily Bitto talking about Wild Abandon. You all know what to do. Pop in and see me because you can now, and pick up yourself up a copy, and treat yourselves. And I will see you in store. Bye bye.